So yes, my name is Brian Gomes. I am the chair of the John Wright Speaker Series. We do these about once a month. This is a brand new venue here. We'd like to give big thanks to Tommy, who owns Cafe Mezzanotte, where we are this evening, and his staff. So let's make sure we take care of our staff. And thank you, Tommy, for hosting us here tonight. Yep. And one other thing, we'll be here for the next couple of months. And next month's speaker will be announced later this week. I'm going to make him go on to the social media so we can get some people to tune in. But we have a special treat in store for you for next month. Okay, with that, I would like to say Jack Turner is an environmental scientist and wildlife photographer, and he's grown up on the Severn River here in the Annapolis area. Jack has been documenting local wildlife for over 5 years. He shares his images and videos with facts and information about some of the most iconic Chesapeake Bay species to drive a conservation around wildlife conversation around wildlife conservation. You can and environmental stewardship. Jack uses his camera as a storytelling tool, bringing audiences inside the secretive life of birds, mammals, reptiles, and insects to show us intimate moments and revealing fascinating truths about flora and fauna, which we share about natural spaces. Jack's work has been featured in local exhibits, publications, and most recently was selected as fan favorite. If anyone has a Maryland DNR annual catalog, as you open it up, he's on the inside fold. And he lives in Eastport. He is a fellow board member and he's a friend of mine. This is Jack Turner.
Thank you for that introduction, Brian. That was it's a lot to live up to. Better make this good. Thanks everybody for being here. Really important to me. Really happy to have you here. Thanks for making the time, being out at this lovely venue. Thanks, Tommy, for having us. Thanks to SRA and thanks to Jesse and Brian. So tonight we're going to be talking about birds of the Severn River, but also beyond, as the Severn River is fairly small in the world of birds. So let's go ahead and get started. So, use this. I'm not getting any response here. There we go. Yes. Okay. So got my clicker working. So when Brian first asked me to do this presentation, I was flattered, but had no idea where to start. I've done presentations on birds and photography before, but this being an SRA presentation, I wanted to weave in, a larger theme of birds and the environment. This is an opportunity to make a statement about birds and why they're important. So I started formulating a thesis for this presentation, and this is the first time that I will have presented this tonight. So bear with me. This is the infancy of this presentation. So I started developing a series of thesis questions that I want to try to cover tonight. The first being, why should we care about birds? Why are birds important? What impact do they have on our lives besides, coming to our bird feeders, seeing them out in the pond or the field? What is the significance of birds in our environment and our lives? The next question I wanted to talk about was, with what I know of what's going on with birds, we're going to have kind of a bleak picture here at a point in this presentation. So talking a little bit about what are the threats to birds, what's affecting birds, what's impacting them negatively, what are some of the big issues that birds face in their, not only their diversity, but in their population numbers in the Severn River and beyond. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about, it's not all doom and gloom. We have great groups, including SRA, that are taking actions to support birds, to support bird populations, to support habitat conservation, policies, initiatives, advocacy. So I wanted to cover some of what's being done to try to support birds. And then I really wanted to drive it home with all of you that are here in person and on Zoom tonight with what you can do. So actions that you can take, simple actions, not changing your entire lifestyle, but a series of actions that you can take that can benefit birds directly or indirectly. So these are kind of the main questions that we're going to cover this evening. And then I'm just going to do a quick overview of how the presentation will go. Mr. Lister.
Just a quick question. Are all the photos in your presentation pictures you took?
Thank you for asking that. And yes, that was on my next slide to say, yes, all the photos are mine unless otherwise noted. If it's not my photo, I put a credit underneath. So yeah, these are all my photos. This is a great blue heron. Do I have a laser pointer here? Ooh, great blue heron. And it has some babies too, 3 baby chicks in the nest. That was last spring in the Chesapeake Bay, not in the Severn, unfortunately. So yeah, these are the thesis questions and just an overview of how the presentation is going to go this evening. We're going to talk about birds in the Severn River and beyond, kind of taking it to a global perspective from this small niche watershed into the world. We're going to talk about why are birds important, one of my thesis questions. We're going to talk about the big picture, which is mostly bad, and you'll see some of the threats to birds. We're going to talk about what's being done to address these issues, what you can do. I'll share some of my resources that you can access either free or very low cost. And then if you have a burning question like Mark, please feel free to ask. But if you want to hold your questions to the end, that would be awesome. So Brian kind of gave my intro already. He kind of took a lot of what I was going to say. Thanks, Brian. But yes, conversations about conservation. So yeah, I'm Jack Turner, also known as Jack Wildlife. That is kind of my art photography moniker. I grew up here in Annapolis, been doing photography for about 5 years. So not a lifetime, but for a while. I work in environmental restoration. So not only is it where I like to take my photos and observe wildlife, but it's where I actually spend a lot of my days doing stream and wetland restoration. And I am civically and involved in a few different groups, notably Severn River Association, where I'm on the board of directors, the Annapolis Conservancy Board, which oversees conservation easements in the city of Annapolis, the Anne Arundel Bird Club, which I will talk about a little bit this evening, and on the Eastport Yacht Club's environmental committee with some other wonderful folks who are doing some stuff over there. And as my personal goals, as Brian said, I use my camera to tell stories. I like to share my photos. I try to attach stories and facts and calls to action to some of my posts on social media to drive these kind of conversations about what's going on outside in the world and nature and how we can be a little bit closer and try to generate some stewardship of our natural resources. That's some of my personal goals. This is a view of me. I actually think Brendan right here took this photo in a wetlands, probably looking for some sort of duck or something like that. So we'll start talking about the Severn River. This is a photo I took with my drone last year. It is a beautiful Maryland scenic river. So in 1971, it was designated as one of 9 scenic rivers in Maryland, which means that it has exceptional value for its beauty, and it made a goal for the state of Maryland to protect and enhance the natural resources of the river. So it's a scenic river, not every river is, so that is kind of special about the Severn. The Severn is about 12 miles long from the mouth up to the Severn Run, but it actually has 152 miles of streams that flow into it. So even though it's just this 12-mile long stretch of river, there is a ton of habitat and streams and different tributaries that feed into it. So it's really, it's a big network of smaller streams that feed into the main stem of the Severn. Uh-oh, I lost my control here. Okay. We also have wetlands of special state concern. So the Severn has bogs, which are a really phenomenal natural resource. They're pretty unique. The Severn has that kind of unique habitat, which is protected up in the Severn Run. And we also have rare, threatened, and endangered species that call the Severn home, like peregrine falcon, gallinule. There's a couple of species in the Severn that are rare, threatened, and or endangered. So one of the iconic species, if you can guess, on the Severn that I'm going to share first is the osprey. So this is a juvenile osprey that was just learning to hunt. It has a fish, so it's just learning, and you can tell it's a juvenile because it's got this orangish eye, whereas the adults have a yellow eye. And actually, the feather pattern is a little bit different from the adults as well. But everyone, if you've been around anywhere in the Chesapeake Bay, and frankly, a lot of parts of the world, has osprey. They're kind of a success story in bird conservation, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But they're very numerous on the Severn. you see them a lot, but you really hear them. They have this very loud, kind of shrieky, shrill call when they come back. Currently, they're down vacationing in Central and South America for the winter, but they'll be back in March. And that's just another osprey with a fish flying over at sunset. I thought that was nice to include. Another iconic species is the blue heron. This is a mated pair of blue herons that are doing a courtship display. They were in their nest, which is just below them. Everybody kind of can identify with the blue heron. It is a very iconic and meaningful species. This is the male over here, and this is the female. So I thought that was a nice photo, kind of showing a nice intimate moment between a pair of blue herons. And this is actually what I think is an osprey nest. I don't think it's actually a blue heron nest, but herons are pretty interesting, and I feel like not a lot of folks know this, but they rook together in up to 50 pairs in the tops of the trees. So usually you'll see like one blue heron by itself, maybe two. Like I saw two together today, but you don't usually see 100 together. But when they roost and when they're during breeding season, there's a spot at Blackwater where they nest in the tops of the trees. There's, I think, 50 pairs. So if you can imagine 100 blue herons all nesting together, and then with their babies a few weeks later, it's pretty magnificent. Those are two of our big, easily identifiable species here on the Severn. This is another drone photo of Eastport, and I'm sharing this slide to highlight a little bit about the cover in our watershed and then different land uses. So we have over 44,000 acres in the watershed of the Severn. And I wanted to ask people what they think is the largest amount of cover. Is it houses? Is it forests? Is it roads? Is it the Naval Academy? The Naval Academy is a couple percent, but so if we look at, this is data from Anne Arundel County's Bureau of Watershed Protection. If we look at the Severn watershed here, the #1 cover type is single family residential at 38%. So that's your small homes, big homes, waterfront homes. That has the most cover in our watershed before forests, which are 32, which is actually, it's pretty good. I mean, we have an urbanized watershed, but we do have a good amount of forest cover, and Severn River Association actually has been what I would argue instrumental in trying to protect the amount of forest cover. So this is just to highlight that, you know, we have 30% forest cover, but we've got a lot of commercial industrial, we've got a lot of impervious, our roadways, sidewalks, things like that. So out of this big watershed that stretches up all the way to Fort Meade and Severn, this is our whole watershed here. Most of that is not historically in the condition that it was. You know, 68% of it is not forest, which, you know, historically was about 100%. So, and this is an interesting one. I really like this one because I think this will stump a few people. This is a checklist. So when you go out birding, you can create a checklist of the birds that you saw. And this one I borrowed from my friend Dan Haas. So thank you, Dan, for that. But I wanted to ask people how many species of birds they think have been found at Sandy Point State Park. Is it 100? Is it 500? Is it 1,000? Less than 100? 1,000? That would be amazing to have 1,000. 200. 200. That's a good guess. So I went on a website and I looked up how many species have been found at different parks in the Severn watershed. Sandy Point is by far the most species observed, 301, which is, in the birding world, that is a lot of different birds. Usually you go out and you see maybe like 30 species of birds. So to have 300 at one spot is quite remarkable. And then, you know, some of the other kind of iconic parks and areas on the Severn that we know, like Greenberry Point, it's got over 200. Thomas Point Park, just about 200. The Severn Run up at the headwaters, 145, and Jonas Green, which is a very small park next to the Naval Academy Bridge, still has 140 different species that have been seen there. So there is a lot of biodiversity of birds here. This is not a monoculture of birds. There are some very common species, but there's a lot of diversity, which I think is really interesting. And if you look, you'll start to find it. So Severn River, awesome, lots of birds, you know, lots of forest cover, but it's a big world out there, and there are a lot of birds that do not call the Severn River home that are also fascinating and deserve some of our attention. These are a mated pair of scarlet macaws that we photographed in Costa Rica last year. which are really just beautiful, amazing. They're like tie-dye kind of birds. So in total in the world, we've got about 18,000 species of birds. So there are a lot. A while ago, it was 10,000 species, but recently they've come to 18,000. That's about how many birds are here. They're everywhere. They're on every continent, even in Antarctica. There's terns and penguins and things that live in the cold. Some birds live a really, really long time, like longer than us. Like I think there's some birds that have lived to be 100 years old, but some species regularly live to 80. They've got really complex communication, including these macaws are highly intelligent. They can communicate, they can use tools, they socialize, they bond, they mourn the death of their friends. So birds, we think of them as just kind of flying around eating birdseed, pooping on our car. But they really do, they have complex interactions and behaviors that we don't even totally understand. So that's kind of what drives me to be interested in them is there's a lot about birds that we don't know. And so trying to observe them and observe their behaviors and draw some conclusions is really interesting to me. What are you doing, boss? So these are some more beyond birds. I chose another couple birds from Costa Rica because I just find them beautiful and intriguing. These are fiery-billed aracaris. They're kind of like a toucan species. They nest in these dead tree holes. They've got these huge bills, kind of like toucan Sam. They eat a lot of berries, but this was a pair that we found that was nesting in this dead tree in Costa Rica. And we got to watch them go in and out of their nesting spot. And later I learned that they can nest in there with up to 6 other of these birds. So it could get pretty this is like a little bird skyscraper hotel. And this is the male here, and that's the female coming in. And then this is called the blue-crowned mott, which is kind of a mouthful. Another almost like bird of paradise with this racket-shaped tail, which we actually don't know how that evolved. They're not sure. Science has not been able to explain why their tail is like that. But in Costa Rica, they have a myth that comes from the Bribri indigenous people that says that when the world was being created, the motts were very lazy and they hid in the sand to hide from having to do any work of building the world. And so as a punishment, they got their tail feathers plucked off, trying to pull them out of the sand. Not very technical or scientific, but that's what we're working with for now. So, just giving you an idea of some of the diversity of birds that are out there, big birds, small birds. Some birds fly, some birds swim, some birds don't fly like penguins, but there's 18,000 species. I could have spent the whole hour just talking about different birds, but going to try to bring it back here a little bit with saying that you don't need to go beyond. Like this photo of a squawk I took from my house around sunset. This photo of a Cooper's hawk I took literally in my backyard at a townhouse. So you don't need to go on some extravagant journey to observe birds. You can do it in your yard. You can do it at your park. You can do it outside of your work. I mean, there's birds everywhere. And once you start noticing them and thinking about them, you'll start to see that they really, they inhabit every different ecosystem in every different area. So now we know a little about Severn, a little about beyond, diversity of birds. Why is this important? Besides me liking birds, which is kind of weird. What's important about birds? Why are they special? Birds do a lot of different things. This is a photo I took of snow geese, about like 3,000 of them, I think, taking off in a field. It makes this really, I guess you can kind of see it. It makes this really interesting. It almost looks abstract. I really like that shot. So why are birds important? Well, they provide ecosystem services. So birds actually perform functions and jobs in the environment that directly benefit humans and benefit the environment. That's one thing that we don't generally think about. It's hard to put a dollar amount on the services that birds provide, but they are providing services, which I'll talk about. Also going to talk a little bit about the cultural significance of birds. So, you think about like an eagle as having as kind of like the mark of the United States. Birds have very, very deep cultural ties with our different societies, our different communities. That mott bird is kind of a symbol of Costa Rica. The scarlet macaw is kind of a symbol as well. So there's cultural significance. We have all these sayings and idioms of, you eat like a bird. There's all kinds of things that we've picked up that we don't even really think about, but that birds play a role in our lives, and how we interact with each other culturally. Birds are also environmental barometers. They can tell us different things about the health of the environment or the lack of health of the environment. So think about things like DDT, which I'll talk about in a minute, but looking at how birds are doing can tell us things about how the overall environment's doing. That they're a barometer for our ecosystems. And they have an economic impact. So hard to quantify their ecosystem services with a dollar amount, but easy to quantify how many people buy a bird book or donate to a bird organization. So there is an economic impact of birds in our economy and around the world that I'll talk about later. So these are the 4 main reasons why birds are important. So the first one, ecosystem services. This is an eastern bluebird. It's in a holly tree. They really like these holly berries in the winter. It's one of their preferred food sources. That was over on the eastern shore, eastern neck. So there's a few different ecosystem services that birds provide. The first one I'll talk about is seed dispersal. Actually, 70% of plants that flower rely on birds to spread their seeds. So like a lot, thousands and thousands of different species of flowering plants rely on birds to eat their seeds or their fruit and basically poop out their seeds somewhere else, thus helping the plant to spread around. So this is an American goldfinch. It was eating some sort of seed here. And then there's also cedar waxwings, which are one of my favorite birds, and they eat a lot of berries, which have seeds inside. They really love berries. And actually, cedar waxwings are one of the few birds that are known to eat fermented berries that have fallen to the ground and get drunk. So cedar waxwings are kind of like the partiers of the bird world, and they hang out in these big flocks, eating fermented berries. It's like a big celebration for the cedar waxwings. But you know, it's really important. Without birds, these plants couldn't proliferate. They couldn't spread their seeds would fall to the ground and they would never go out anywhere. And not only is taking the seeds and pooping them out somewhere important, but also the bird's poop has fertilizer in it. So the seed hits the ground and it has like already a little shot of fertilizer with it, which gives it a better chance of surviving and growing up. That's a really good one, is the seed dispersal. It's a big ecosystem service bird providing. Another one is pest control. So this is a white-breasted nuthatch. Birds eat bugs. A lot of birds eat a lot of bugs. I think there's a statistic that a wren, when it's feeding its young, can get up to 500 insects a day to bring back to its nest. So birds are constantly out there snatching bugs off of leaves, out of the air. You know, some birds fly on the wing and catch bugs. So birds are a natural form of pest control. This is a type of warbler with a wasp, which no one likes wasps. So I was happy to see that bird get that wasp. I was one less wasp out there. But birds have this really good. They're really good at controlling pests. So when we see birds decline, we tend to see more bugs, and not bugs that we like ticks, and you know, those are the kind of bugs. So pest control, another really important ecosystem service that birds provide. Getting all the nasty bugs. That's a stink bug, by the way. One of the least terrible bug. So yeah, one less stink bug thanks to that nuthatch. Another ecosystem service is pollination. So this is a Puerto Rican emerald hummingbird, and it's actually evolved along with this fire plant. You can see its beak fits perfectly. They have evolved together. They have a symbiotic relationship, basically, where the bird comes, drinks the nectar, picks up some of the pollen, goes to another one of these plants and pollinates it. So they pollinate, I think my statistic I'm going to share is they pollinate 8,000 species of plants in North and South America. And these plants rely on hummingbirds because they could not survive without hummingbirds. So pollination is a very important ecosystem service that they provide. This is our only hummingbird we have here, is the ruby-throated. Unfortunately, we don't have a big diversity of hummingbirds. We just have the one breeding species here, is the ruby-throated, but it's really pretty. And I really love the males have this really fiery ruby patch on their throat, but they're also a very important pollinator here. And they're really attracted to the color red. So that's why if you ever look at a hummingbird feeder, they're usually colored red, because the hummingbirds see that and they're like, ooh, pollen, nectar, let's go. And hummingbirds weigh less than a nickel. I'm going through some quick facts here. Hummingbirds weigh less than a nickel, which is insane. They weigh like 2 to 8 grams, something like just unbelievably tiny. Their heart rate beats 1,200 beats per minute, which is like, I think we're at like what, like 60, 70 beats per minute. So 1,200 beats per minute, and their wings beat 70 times per second. So they're one of the few birds that can fly backwards. Whoops. One of the few birds that can fly backwards. They beat their wings super fast. They can hover in midair, but they need a lot of pollen. They're constantly buzzing around looking for the next flower. And ecosystem engineering, like if you think about beavers, how beavers chop down trees and build dams, they're kind of engineering their environment. Well, birds have a similar functioning environment. Most notably is the pileated woodpecker, which is our big, like Woody the woodpecker. If you've ever seen those. I would do it, but it's going to hurt some people's ears. They're kind of like. That's a pileated woodpecker. They're awesome. They have this big, like punk rock mohawk. And what they do, like all woodpeckers do, is they drill holes in trees, and they usually like dead trees because it's softer wood. There's probably bugs inside of a dead tree eating the dead wood. So what they do inadvertently is they create these large holes in the trees. And I know it just looks like a hole in a tree, but does anybody know why it's important? You're exactly right. They create nesting. Uh-oh. What did I do? Oh, they create, this is a male and female pileated woodpecker. They create nesting cavities for species like this. Yes, like Albert here, one of our local eastern screech owls. So through their poking holes in trees, they create houses for other animals, mostly birds, but squirrels or other animals will use nesting spaces. And without the pileated woodpeckers, we lose that. And these birds don't have a home. Some birds don't make nests. Like this owl will not make a nest. It needs to find a cavity in the tree. So if you lose the pileated woodpeckers, there's kind of a chain reaction and no one else has a home. So their ecosystem engineering is also a really important function in our environment. And then not my favorite, but definitely an important one is scavenging and what we call sanitary services. So kind of the janitors, cleanup crew of the bird world are vultures, and there's some other examples, but here the most common examples we have are the turkey and the black vulture. And they're just eating something dead on the side of the road, but what they're actually doing is they're cleaning it up. Super important. Yeah, so what they help to do is suppress the spread of disease and contamination. So if they eat something, other things can't come into contact with it and get sick. So they do a really, really important job of cleaning up the environment, helping to recycle things. Their poop is fertilizer. So they also play a very important role, even though they're not really people's favorite birds. They're not particularly attractive. And actually, when I was doing this presentation, I had some photos of vultures eating like dead animals, but I thought that maybe wasn't appropriate. So I left it out. I just got them perched. They're like kind of posing rather than, yeah, we're at a restaurant, So, okay, just to summarize here, why birds are important, driving this home. They have these ecosystem services, interspersal pollination, engineering, and sanitation. This is a female red-winged blackbird with a dragonfly or damselfly larvae. That was actually on the Severn, so I do have some Severn-related photos. Yeah, they do all these ecosystem services, and then without them, our environment would look a lot different. They also have cultural significance. So thinking about the blue heron, I literally just Googled blue heron company. There are, I don't know if there's thousands, but there's certainly hundreds of companies and brands that use the blue heron for their image, for their branding. And like Severn River Association, if you look at SRA, it literally has a blue heron as our icon. So the cultural significance goes really deep with birds, and we identify with birds in a very strong way in all cultures throughout history, from the phoenix rising out of old history to current day with whatever Blue Heron Research Partners is. Giving them some free advertising here. There's all kinds. And so this is just one example of blue herons. I mean, I know that when I drive around town, I see trucks that are like blue heron, whatever service. It's everywhere in our culture. Another big one I wanted to talk about are sports teams. Yeah, kind of wish the Ravens had won the other night, but that's okay. So yeah, I mean, our two professional sports teams, like it's kind of a big deal, right? They're both named after birds. It's just another kind of example of the cultural significance. If we didn't have them, I don't know what we would call our teams. I don't even want to think about it. I like the Orioles. I like the Ravens, And like I said earlier, the eagle, United States seal, a lot of countries have a national bird. Ours, I think Benjamin Franklin wanted to be the turkey, which would have been pretty cool. Turkeys are awesome. But we went with the eagle and, it's something that we identify with. And without eagles, we would not have that, or we would have chosen, I'm not sure what we would have chosen. So it's hard to measure that, but there is a lot of cultural significance for birds. And then one outside of the United States that I'll share. This is also from Costa Rica. This is called the resplendent quetzal. It's got this super long tail. And it's actually the national animal of Guatemala, which is a huge cultural icon for them. It's actually, their money in Guatemala is called a quetzal, and it features an image of a quetzal on their money. So again, just culturally significant everywhere. When we were in Costa Rica, there's like statues to these birds. And people have them hanging, little like bobbleheads hanging off of their rear view mirrors on their cars. It's just, we're very closely tied to birds culturally. So, like I said, birds can tell us things about the health of the environment. This is an American oyster catcher, and you can actually see on its two little legs here, it's been banded. So it was collected somewhere and put these bands on, which is an identifying tag. And I actually reported this one and got some information on it from the banding lab. So one of the reasons we ban birds is to track their patterns, where they're moving. But also if they die or if they're caught, you can look at how healthy they are. And you can tell things like the oysters that this oyster catcher is eating, maybe they have a lot of mercury or PCBs in them. And you can look at the bird's biomass and measure the amount of toxins and chemicals that it has. And that gives you an idea about what the bird's eating and what the health of what the bird's eating is. So an oyster catcher is a good example of what we call an indicator species. It can indicate certain things in the environment to us. Another one, like I already shared, is the osprey. Osprey is actually one of like the best indicator species in the bay. There's tons of studies that have been done on osprey health, osprey populations. Because osprey are this apex predator, they're at the top of the food chain. All of the nasty toxins and everything accumulate into them because they pick it up from everything else. It goes up the food chain. They're at the very top eating these fish. If the fish has a lot of mercury or toxins or something that we can measure in it, that will show up in the osprey. So when we capture osprey or find a unfortunately dead osprey, we can look at its biomass and it gives us indications of the health of our environment. Without that, we might not know how healthy our environment is. We might not be able to make decisions on improving our environment or changing our trajectory or a couple other things that I'll talk about. So the economic impact. This is where the rubber starts to hit the road for a lot of people because, talking about pollination and seed dispersal and the ravens is one thing, but when we start talking about dollars and jobs and things that people can really latch onto, economic indicators, that is something that everybody can digest, right? I mean, we all kind of know about the economy. So here, this is a group of birders, a group that I went out with, and I just wanted to highlight how everybody has binoculars. A lot of people have tripods. A lot of people have like fancy cameras. So all of these things cost money, and they've all been purchased to look at birds. It's all part of the bird economy. And thank you to Dan Haas and Tim Carney for taking us out on this special birding trip. So I wanted to ask you how much you think the bird economy is worth. the economic impact of birding. I want to ask how much you think the direct spending on birding per year in the United States is. Is it a billion? Is it 100 million? Is it 100 billion? 3 billion? I got 3 billion. A couple 100 million. Okay. Okay, the highest I'm hearing is 3 billion. So let's see, direct spending on birding per year is $40 billion. That's direct spending. And this is like all of my stuff, all my facts are from, I'm like trying to include the sources, so I'm not just making stuff up. And this was actually in 2006. So this was a long time ago as far as like economic stuff. I'm sure this has gone up from 40 billion in 2006 to 2022. Like I wasn't birding in 2000. I've added at least like $2,000 to this total since 2006 because I bought some stuff. And so that's direct spending. That's that. I'm not sure exactly what direct spending means, but that is direct spending. Then there's indirect and associated spending. So when you stop at the gas station, when you're going on your way to see birds, you know, the indirect spending is over $100 billion a year. There's 46 million birders in the United States. There's a lot of bird nerds out there. There's some in this room, I think, too. That's 1 in 5 United States adults. So 1 in 5 of you are birders. Hopefully 2 in 5 after tonight, or 5 in 5 tonight. We'll see how many we can get. And 860,000 jobs related to birding each year. So, so there is a measurable impact for birds. And if all the birds go away, all of that goes away. So putting this in dollar terms and job terms, I think is a good way for people to understand the impact that birds have on our lives and in our economy. And this is a northern shoveler, one of my favorite little winter ducks. It has like a comically large bill that it uses to shovel around in shallow water and pick out invertebrates and plants. And it literally has like this huge, it's like comically large. Anyway. So we're gonna kind of take a hard turn here into like kind of bleak territory. We're gonna talk about some of the bad things that are happening with birds. But then I promise we'll turn it around and we'll get a little more cheery in a minute. So the big bad picture. We're going to talk about population and diversity decline in birds. We're going to talk about human impacts on birds. How do humans affect bird populations? And then we're going to talk about some emerging issues. So new issues that we're still trying to understand how they affect birds and what we can do to address them. So first, I'm going to talk about population diversity decline. There was a study that came out 2021, I believe. Since 1970, we've lost 3 billion birds in the United States. There are a lot of birds in the United States, but 3 billion is like very, very significant. This graph down here might be a little hard to see, but this is showing in different ecosystem types, the percent reduction of bird populations since 1970. And you can see just about every habitat type has seen a pretty measurable reduction, except for wetlands. If you see wetlands down here at the bottom, this blue bar, they're in the green, they're positive. And I'm going to talk about why that is in a minute, but I think the overall thing here is that in total, despite wetland birds being up, we've lost about 3 billion birds since 1960. And that's all across America, North America. And a lot of that is due to human impacts. So the things that we do have an effect on birds, how they can survive, how they can proliferate, keep their population stable. We have a very bad impact on birds generally. We're generally, the more of us there are, kind of the less of birds there are. This might be hard to see. This is talking about how much land, how much bird habitat we've lost, grasslands, because of converting it into agriculture, which we need agriculture, we need food to live. A lot of this is for cattle. So we clear a lot of grasslands that are bird habitat to make alfalfa for cattle for our beef. So that's had a very, very negative impact. That's actually the largest negative impact has been losing grassland in the United States for bird populations. And then also our buildings are pretty bad for birds. Birds hit buildings, windows, or just the building a lot and die. And I have some numbers that I'm going to share about bird building collisions and what that's done to populations annually. And this is not my photo because I could not take a photo like this, but really sad photo of a thrush that hit this window back here and unfortunately died. Just trying to drive home that windows are a danger to birds. And can't see the whole thing, but a couple studies that were done, the median birds that die from hitting windows each year, 599 million in the United States. So like almost 600 million birds was the median estimate that die from colliding with buildings each year. It's a lot of birds. And I'm sure that people here have stories of birds hitting their window while they're at home. Maybe they died, maybe they got up and were able to fly away, but it's a pretty common thing. Birds get confused.
What species is that?
That's some sort of thrush. It's not my photo.
I've had 3 specifically thrush hit my window the last year.
We need to get some bird, we need to use some window stickers.
Like, do they have bad vision?
No,
They're the only ones.
They like
that
the woods.
figured it out.
they like, yeah, yeah.
There's been 3.
So, yeah, so
That's all I got.
birds, buildings hit bad. I'm gonna share, oh, this is a really fun exercise that I want to do with you all. So cats, we know cats aren't good for birds, which I'll talk about in a second, and we know buildings kill 600 million birds a year. Which do you think kills more birds per year? Buildings, this is a picture of Memphis that I took, or cats? This is my dad's cat. Cats or building, wait, hands. Hands for cats. Okay, cats.
Birds.
Killing birds.
Not my indoor cat.
Who kills more birds, outdoor cats or buildings?
Cat, don't look at me.
Okay, who thinks buildings? Okay, we got kind of 50-50 split there. So this is going to be kind of revealing, and actually it was for me when I was building this presentation. Buildings, like I said, 599 million is the median. Cats down here, 2.4 billion birds per year. So outdoor cats kill a lot of birds. They're actually on here, if you look, they're the #1. They kill more birds than electric lines, vehicles. Wind turbines kill some birds, but building glass kills like an insane amount more poison. So all in all, we lose about 3.3 billion birds a year. A lot of birds are born to replace some of those, but like I said, since 1970, we've lost 3 billion birds in total. So this is kind of a bleak picture. And we still have birds outside, but there's just a lot less than there used to be. And this is from the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is,
Those are annual numbers
these are annual,
from 2017.
US only, ordered by meeting estimate annually as of 2017. So human impacts, we got cats, we got buildings, we got poisons that we put out, pesticides. One that I'll highlight quickly here is called DDT, which I don't know if, I didn't really know that much about DDT because it was before I was born, but we used to use DDT to control mosquitoes. We found out that what it was doing was making bird eggshells very brittle. So when the birds go to sit on their nest, they crunch the eggs and they can't have any babies. And that led to a really, really rapid and stark population decline for pretty much all birds, including osprey, including bald eagles. And then we had this wonderful conservationist who is definitely someone that I have learned a lot from. Rachel Carson wrote a book called Talent Springs. She's actually from Maryland, right? Montgomery County, yeah. So Rachel Carson made this big hullabaloo saying, hey, the use of DDT is killing birds. And there was a lot more to it than that, but this is actually thanks to Rachel Carson and many others. This DDT is actually kind of a success story. Well, stopping DDT is a success story because we were able to save these species like bald eagles and osprey that were in danger and bring them back to more stable populations that could stop using this chemical. So the more we know, the better decisions we can make. And these are some images I took of bald eagles because they were one of the main species that were kind of highlighted as an effect of DDT because they would lay their eagle eggs and sit on them and squish them, and really, really sad. But eagles have made a really good comeback. Eagles are a big success story after stopping use of DDT, and they are pretty numerous. I mean, you can see them here in Severn. There's even Eagle Nest Point. There's a spot in the Severn River. There's There's a couple eagle nests on the Severn, if you know where to look. So the eagles are here, and they're here usually year round. You can see them in the winter. We actually just saw last weekend, we were at Sandy Point, we saw 2 eagles mating. Kind of cool. Yeah. Yeah, anyway.
What you're into.
So DDT was this issue in the 70s, but we've got emerging issues. We've got new issues to deal with. We got over DDT. We figured out what to do. It's a big success story. Now we've got things called PFAS and PFOS, these polyfluoroalkyl substances that are used in a lot of different items, and they're also used in firefighting foam. And what these are also known as is forever chemicals. So these chemicals get out into our environment and they don't break down. We don't really totally know the effects that they have on organic beings like humans or birds, but we're starting to study how PFAS affects the environment. And you know, there's been studies that have measured PFAS in birds in their blood and can demonstrate that PFAS is getting out of the environment, getting into birds and staying there. And like I said, we don't totally know the effects of it, what it does once, you know, in certain concentrations in your blood, but we do know that it's probably not something that you want to have. And so there's actually a lot being done to address this issue, which I'll talk about in a second, but this is just one example of an emerging issue for threats to birds. This is a nice diagram that shows how PFAS gets into the environment. You know, it flows downhill. It goes down to the bottom. It gets eaten by bugs, along with their sediment and little meals they have. Fish eat them. It gets biomagnified, and then we have our osprey up here, which is eventually going to get concentrated all the PFAS, similarly to how DDT got concentrated in eagles and larger birds of prey, and that's why DDT was an issue. So these are a bunch of waterfowl at Pea Island in the Outer Banks, and this was just to highlight how.
I did that, sorry.
What are you doing?
I was trying to turn it up because they can't hear you back. All right,
So, I feel like I'm being too loud.
get on top of the mic.
Hello. This is Jack Wildlife reporting live.
Speak loud.
Okay. So, you know, despite this kind of gloomy picture that I just painted, we've got less birds. We kill a lot of birds every year. We're putting out these forever chemicals that are getting into birds. It's not all doom and gloom. And like I said, the wetland birds have actually seen an increase in their populations, like a pretty significant amount in wetland populations. And so when I first saw that statistic, I was curious why. It's really because we have prioritized restoring and protecting wetlands. Since like the 1990s in the Farm Bill, we added an easement program for wetlands on agricultural lands. And so people started to be incentivized to protect wetlands. So we've actually lost a lot less wetlands than every other habitat type, which has led to an increase in birds that use wetlands. So the wetland birds are, you know, maybe by accident, kind of got a boost from our policy actions to protect wetlands. Because wetlands actually do a lot of other functions in the environment besides just the habitat for birds, which I won't talk about now, but wetlands are really important ecosystems. So yeah, we've got good wetland birds. This is just another quick couple graphs. The blue line here shows our wetland bird populations after the passage of the Farm Bill in 1990, which started to allocate money to farmers to protect wetlands that was on their property. So providing incentives for landowners to protect their habitat, this is like pretty good data to show that that is a great way to help birds out. And then you can see the forest birds, you know, they've kind of leveled off after the Farm Bill, which is good. They didn't keep increasing. And our grassland species, they're the ones, again, that I said have seen the largest decline. They're maybe leveling out a little bit, but they've declined by like 50% since 1970. So not all good across the board, but wetlands are kind of a success story for birds and bird populations. And that's a gadwall. I like that image. So, okay, things are bad. We're killing birds. What are we doing? You know, we as in the collective, we not necessarily individuals, but what are we doing at broad, high levels to address some of these issues of bird decline? We've got different policies that we can implement. We've got groups that do advocacy work, including Severn River Association does some advocacy work. And we've got habitat protection restoration. These are three good tools that we have to protect birds and try to maybe bring back some of these 3 billion that we've lost in the next 50 years. Maybe turn things around a little bit here. So first I'll talk about a little just quickly about policy. So there was a federal bill, HR 2280, that was for bird-friendly buildings, which I'll talk about a little bit, which is pretty some cost-neutral, simple steps to take that basically show birds there's a building there so they don't fly in your window like Brian, wherever he is, like his thrushes that hit his window. You know, passing policies for bird smart buildings is a really good first step. It doesn't cost a lot of money, it's cost neutral. And the GSA, which General Services, which is they are like the biggest landlord of buildings and have thousands and thousands of buildings that they can implement these changes on and save millions and millions of birds each year from crashing into windows and dying. Some other policies are the North American Wetlands Conservation Act. I think that actually is attributable to why we've got more wetland birds. We've got the Neotropical Migratory Bird Act, which provides money for birds that migrate to the tropics. And we've got the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which is actually kind of a poster for conservation. It's been around for 100+ years that protected first the bald eagle and golden eagle, and then any birds that migrate have special protections. So these are just three big policy examples. As far as advocacy goes, I mean, we've got all sorts of organizations. Most people know about Audubon, Audubon Society. There's the American Bird Conservancy. And then we've got some programs here in Maryland, like Bird City. Cities can take certain steps to get certified as a bird-friendly city. And we've got the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership here, which is a branch of the Maryland Ornithological Society that advocates for smart policies. They do some lobbying. They, get petitions out, get people motivated to participate civically with advocacy. And then we've got habitat protection. This is where I'm going to spend like 5 minutes talking because this is actually what I know the most about. So this is Hart Miller Island, which is where we used to place dredge material from the Port of Baltimore. We would take this material we have to dredge from our federal shipping channels, and we would deposit it in the port of at Hart Miller Island to create habitat. So this island, it was actually two islands, Hart Island and Miller Island, that guy who wrote it. And starting in the 80s, we started dumping millions of cubic yards of dredge material at Hart Miller Island. You can actually see, I took this photo from an airplane, but you can actually see the pockets of wetlands and a little bit of the highlands. Tens of thousands of birds use this island every year, nesting, passing through. It's a really important rest stop on their migrations. And that one's now filled and completed. You can actually go there by boat. You can go there and camp out there. There's thousands of pairs of terns that nest there, all kinds of shorebirds, like these snowy egrets, use that habitat. And before there was nothing there. So this is like an 1,100 acre area that now is habitat for birds.
North City Park, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Edgemere.
Yep.
Yep, right off of the Middle River.
Poplar Island.
Poplar Island. So another kind of bird habitat or just habitat protection and restoration success story is Poplar Island. This was another island that had eroded and originally was slated to be another 1,100 acres of habitat. It was so successful that they've now expanded. I think it's about 1,700. They added this whole area. It's about 1,700 acres of habitat now. And I think 64 million cubic yards of dredge material. And I wanted to know how much that was. So I did some calculations. It could fill up the Empire State Building almost twice with all the dredge material they put there.
Can I add, they do like day field trips there, so you go down to Tillman Island.
Poplar Island.
All right, so quick sidebar. This is an amazing day field trip. I've done this with my organization. You go down to Tillman Island, right over the drawbridge. It's a 45-minute ride from there. It's run by MDE. You go out to the island, they give you a guided tour by bus. You see the terrapin sanctuaries, the bird sanctuaries. It's amazing. It's free. Do it.
Upper Island, ladies and gentlemen, that's Brian Gomes. So Papa had another great success story, building this habitat for birds that was lost. It used to be a big island, it eroded, and we've now built it back and protected it. Again, tens of thousands of birds use this for nesting habitat. They added this expansion, I think it got completed in 2021. They're still adding a little bit of material here, but the next story, this is the turn, one of the terns that nests there.
Do the call.
That one I don't know. If I have a kingfisher, I'll do a big kingfisher call. And the last one I'll talk about for habitat protection island in Chesapeake Bay is it's called James Island. And I actually had the opportunity to visit James Island last year and took a photo with my drone. James Island used to be 1,400 acres historically, and that's what it is as of a year ago. I was out there with a friend of mine, Jay Fleming, who went back last year, and there's actually, he said there's basically like just this little tiny bit there now. All of this is now gone. So James Island has completely eroded away, but we are, not we, but the Army Corps of Engineers is now slating James and the Barren Island next to it for their next big mid-bay restoration project. So over the next 40 years, they're going to take dredge material from Baltimore and rebuild James Island to over 2,000 acres, similar to Poplar, but they will rebuild the habitat here at James using, I think, 100 million cubic yards. It could fill up the Ravens Stadium like a couple times with the amount of material they're going to put here. So that's just getting started. It's a $4 billion project over the next 40 years. So they've awarded some contract money and they're in planning and design, and they'll start to place dredge material there in the next couple of years. This is actually a project that I worked on. This is at my work. We converted a farm field into a wetland. It was historically a wetland that had been drained. So what we do on farms a lot of times, we take productive wetland areas and we drain the water out of them so we can grow crops because they're very nutrient-rich soils. So this had been farmed for like 150 years. What we did was we came in and we plugged up the ditches that were draining the field, so you can see all the dark stuff is water. So we kind of re-wet this whole area and re-established the wetlands that had been here historically. And it was a huge success story. This is what it looked like last summer. These are like little box elder trees, blue spike, pale spike lobelia. So you've got all these native wetland plants, and that brings in the native birds. This is a green heron, and this is a red-winged blackbird. Two wetland species that would never have been on this site as an agriculture field. But once we transitioned it back to a wetland, there they go. I took these pictures on this site, like right in here. You know, seeing those changes in front of you, you know, there during construction and monitoring it afterwards, seeing these birds show up after you build a habitat for them is really encouraging that we can have a positive impact when we try to do habitat protection and restoration. And you know, I've been able to see that, so I wanted to share that with you. Okay, all this big stuff, a little bit of it kind of, you know, at the federal level, at the global level, what can you do in your daily life to help birds? This is probably one of the best ones, is planting native plants. So whether you have a townhouse or you have, you know, a big yard with a couple acres of lawn, transitioning some of your lawn to native plantings is like the #1 way that you can help birds. You're providing them habitat, because bugs will come in here and then the birds are going to follow the bugs because they want food. Birds can nest in here, they can find nesting sites. So providing nesting sites through planting diverse natives are two of the best things you can do to help birds. Even at my house in the townhouse, I have plants out back that attract bugs and pollinators that then attract birds. And we get all kinds of birds in my little 15-foot by 15-foot backyard. It's pretty amazing. So you don't have to have a big yard to be able to have a positive impact. I lost control. Okay, another one. If you have a big yard, you can leave your dead trees. As long as they're not posing a threat to your house or your car, leaving the dead tree is actually really good for birds. Like we saw the woodpeckers poking holes for the owls to live. Leaving dead trees is actually a really positive action you can take, and it doesn't cost you anything. You just leave it. Maybe eventually the tree will fall over, but as long as it won't fall on your house, leave the tree. Keep your cats inside. What was it, 2.4 billion birds a year? So I know cats like to go out and cats are cute. I mean, I love cats. I am definitely a cat lover, but like Brian said, keep your cat inside, right, Brian?
Yes.
Cats inside. Cats inside, baby. That's how we're doing it. All 2023. Cats inside. Reducing or eliminating mowing. You know, the lawn is kind of this thing that we've had. It used to be a statement of wealth. You could have all this land that you didn't have to farm. But we've kind of held on to that as this kind of traditional thing where it doesn't really have any value for the environment. So reducing the amount of lawn that you have and planting natives is a really easy thing you can do. Like it could be as simple as just not mowing an area of your yard. You don't have to necessarily plant anything there. You can just kind of let it go wild. That's going to benefit birds directly. So reducing or eliminating mowing on the property that you have. Providing water like bird baths or just small areas that birds can find water is important, especially in the summer when water can be kind of hard to come by, and birds need water too. And then thinking holistically, so planting these native flowers, kind of thinking about how all of your actions can have an effect on birds holistically, as opposed to just having this narrow view of one thing that's there's no silver bullet to this, but all of the small actions can add up to a measurable positive impact. So thinking holistically about how we support birds is also good. This is one of my favorite. That's me and my dad. It's bird boxes. So I built this bird box for my dad's birthday, and he's got a nice yard. So I gave it to my dad last year, and he put it up in the backyard. And can you hit play, Justin? And this is the bird box that I built and we put in my dad's yard. And this is, hopefully it plays. This is an eastern bluebird that we built the box for. The bluebird found the nesting box and had 2 broods of baby bluebirds. So last year there were 2 sets of baby bluebirds that were there, and the bluebird parents are bringing bugs in and out and cleaning out the nest. Really fun to watch. You can build bird boxes for all different. You can build them for owls. You can build an owl box. You can build wood duck boxes. You can build purple. Where is it? Purple martin houses. I mean, you can build homes for all different kinds of birds, no matter what kind of yard you have. Maybe you could ask them to do it at your local park. I mean, there's all different types of bird boxes. This is on Smith Island. This is a purple martin colony. There's a little purple martin right there. They eat a ton of insects. People have a misconception they eat mosquitoes. They don't really eat mosquitoes, but they do some pest control, and they're also threatened. So yeah, purple martins, they go in these like gourd shapes or in these little like houses. So lots of different bird boxes you can build. They're easy to build, or you can buy them. Another one, this is for Brian Gomes out in the audience. Window stickers. So there's other ways to do it, but one of the best ways is these little transparent stickers you can put on your window. And that helps the birds to see that there is a structure there. Because really what birds usually see is the reflection. They see the trees reflecting off your window, and they think, oh, I'm going in the forest. And they
Only the hermit brushes see that reflection.
full speed into the window. So
It's Darwinism.
this is just one example. These little tiny dots help birds to see that there's a window there. I could have included a bunch of different examples. There's a bunch of ways you can make birds safe windows at your house or workplace or wherever. And then turning off your lights at night. So I use these motion activated lights. So at my house, it's dark outside until you move and then the light turns on. But having lights at night can be disruptive to migration. Birds can actually crash in your windows at night if you've got bright lights on inside. So turning off your lights at night is another super easy way to help out birds and making sure that your windows are safe for them. This is a juvenile black crown night heron from Bat Creek in the Severn.
Here's a call.
I don't know if they have a call. They're like, I don't know black crown heron is a call. So some of the things you can do, you can participate in citizen science. You can go out and do an eBird checklist, which I'll talk about really quickly in a second. I know we're getting short on time here. You can do a bird breeding survey. You can collect data that scientists can use to understand about bird populations and habitats. Really easy. You can literally go to your park and take some notes and send them in. It's super simple. You can reduce your energy and water use. That's good for more than just birds. It's probably good for your utility bill. It's also good for your carbon footprint, and it benefits birds. Recycle and use recycled products. This one again ties into a lot of things beyond birds, but it does have an effect on supporting bird populations. And reduce your use of chemicals. So like eliminate your pesticide use in your yard, please. Like poison, rodenticide kills a lot of eagles, osprey, owls get killed by poisons and pesticides. Fertilizers aren't great either. And really, if you plant natives in your yard and you get this kind of self-sustaining, self-managing ecosystem, you don't need pesticides. You have the birds come in to eat your bugs. It all kind of feeds into a cycle where you don't need to be micromanaging everything, and it's self-sustaining. So reducing your chemical use in the environment, really good way to help birds. Just really quickly, I'll talk about a couple of resources. This is a hooded merganser from a couple of weeks ago. One of my favorite winter waterfowl. It's got this big white crest. So I'll talk about eBird, talk about Merlin. These are two applications you can use, and talk about my local club or your local club. So eBird is this online resource. There's an app you can get for your phone as well. That's where I shared these checklists at the beginning with the number of species that we're seeing. So these little dots on the map are all called hotspots. And you can check into one of these hotspots if you go out to Greenberry Point, for example, and you can tell eBird what species you've seen. And now you just participated in citizen science. You are helping. You are being part of the solution. Really easy, free. Anytime you're out at a park or any birding hotspot, you can get on eBird and document your species. This is a resource I've used a lot. It's called Merlin. It's a free app on your phone. This, you can literally, I did it today. You hold up your phone and it listens and it tells you what birds are there. It is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like I found like 10 species today, just kind of holding my phone out when I was in the woods at work. And if you take a picture, you can put your picture in a Merlin and it'll say, oh, that's a Blackbirdian warbler. So it can look at your photo and use artificial intelligence. So this is actually a resource I've used to learn a lot about birds. eBird I use to document birds. Merlin I've used to learn about birds, both free, both easily accessible, any phone, you can do it on the computer, whatever you're comfortable with. And then local clubs. So I'm a member of the Anne Arundel Birding Club. We were out with them last weekend at Sandy Point. This is us at Quiet Waters a few months back. So I've really learned so much, and I was just telling these folks right here from my local club. I am not the most knowledgeable birder. Some of the people in this club are incredibly knowledgeable, and tagging along with them and asking them questions, going on walks with them has been a great way for me to learn more about birds, get some tips on how to see different birds, and even get tips on how to be a better friend to birds. Really like Dan Haas, Elle McGee, Chris Everly. There's a bunch of folks who have like taken me under their wing a little bit and taught, and taught me about birds. So, and they're all friendly and they're really excited to get new people involved. I would encourage you to check out your local bird club and participate on a walk or go to one of their talks. Okay, this is the end. But as part of this presentation, I want to challenge everybody here to participate in what I'm calling the 2023 Jack Wildlife Birding Challenge. So this is a series of steps you can take to help birds that anybody should be able to do. And I'm challenging you to do one, to do a couple, or to like go all out and do all of them. So here's how this is going to work.
Back up one back.
So here's how this is going to work.
Thank you, sir.
I'm going to ask you this year, here I can go back. I'm going to ask you this year, and maybe you already do some of these. Maybe some of these are things that you already do. I mean, some people keep their cats inside. So if you already do some of these things, thank you. And I'm not talking to you. If you don't do any of these things, you gotta start. You gotta do one. Like tomorrow, you should do one of these things. If you do none of them. And if you do some of them, thank you. You're a friend of the birds. And I would challenge you to do at least one more, maybe a couple more. So as part of this challenge, and you want to be, this is who you want to be. You want to be this green heron with the crown on. If you do 1 to 3 challenges from this list, you're a friend of the birds. You do 4 to 7, you're a bird guardian. You do between 8 and 11, you're a bird hero. Everybody wants to be a hero, you know? You are. And if you do 12 to 16, you're a bird champion. And I will personally take you on a birding walk.
Your house and thank you for.
Oh, yeah, and there are 16 different things you can do here, but there are a lot, actually on the way here, I thought of like 5 more. And, you know, this is not an exhaustive list, but think about things you can do to help birds. This is just to kind of get your creative ideas, creative juices flowing. But there's lots of things you can do, and you know, you can Google around or email me and ask me. And I hope that we can get some bird champions in here this year. So this is how you can keep up with me. And I can put the slide back on, but I really just want to say thank you for having me tonight. And I think we're.
One more time for Jack, everybody. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, go ahead and, I'll let you MC that, but.
Okay.
Is that wireless that's on?
No.
Be loud, Jessica.
Oh my gosh. I'll do the kid video. Uh-huh. Do I know about what? Do I know about being a bird life species champion? I don't believe I do. I guess I'm not. I'd like to be. Tell me more. Awesome. Thank you. Bird life species champion. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you. Yeah. Annapolis is a bird city. We're also a bee city. We're a lot of cities. But yeah, Annapolis is a bird city because they've taken a series of steps to get certified under this Bird City, Maryland